The Silverado's engine purred softly as the party lights faded in the rearview mirror. Connor was passed out in the back seat, drooling on his own shoulder after overdoing it on the beer we'd gotten from some college guy. I should have been worried about my best friend, but my attention was completely focused on the man beside me. Antonio Martinez drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the gear shift. Even in the darkness of the truck, I could make out his sharp profile, the 5 o'clock shadow he always had by the end of the day, his calloused hands that told the story of years working with wood and concrete. His scent filled the truck's cab, a mix of clean sweat, sawdust, and something undefinably masculine that always left me a little dizzy whenever he was close. "Thanks for picking us up, Mr. Martinez," I mumbled, breaking the silence that had settled since we left the party. He glanced at me quickly before turning his eyes back to the road. "No need to thank me, Adrian. And you can call me Tony. You're old enough now." Tony. The name sounded different when he said it himself, more intimate somehow. I was 19 that summer of 2015, fresh out of high school, and with a guaranteed spot at the University of Oregon for the fall. It was July, and the heat of the day still radiated from the asphalt even though it was almost midnight. The windows were down, letting in the warm night air and the distant sound of crickets. What you're hearing here is just the beginning. The full, unfiltered stories with all the details you can imagine are available now. Check out the link in the description right now. My childhood had been a succession of moves. My parents divorced when I was 12, and Mom couldn't stay in one place for long. Portland, Eugene, Salem. Always a new city, a new school, a new start. Until we got here, to this coastal town of 15,000 people where I finally managed to put down roots. I met Connor Martinez on the first day of 7th grade, 6 years ago. I was the new kid again, shy and observant, while Connor was everything I wasn't. Outgoing, confident, the center of attention. Still, we became inseparable. Maybe because he liked having a constant audience, and I was always a good listener. But it wasn't just Connor who drew me to the Martinez house. Since I was 13, I'd had a strange fascination with his dad. Tony was everything I imagined a man should be. Strong, capable, dependable. At 42, he had built a thriving construction business with his own 2 hands, literally. His arms were thick and defined from constant physical work, his skin tanned by the Oregon sun, and he had this quiet presence that made me feel safe just being in the same room. For all those years, I told myself it was just admiration. Tony was the dad I wished I'd had, the kind of man I wanted to become. But in the last few months, especially since he and his wife had divorced the year before, something had changed. I noticed details I shouldn't have. How his jeans fit snugly in all the right places. How his voice got husky when he was tired. How he always smelled good even after a full day of work. I was still figuring out my sexuality that summer. I'd had a few girlfriends in high school, but nothing that ever really meant anything. I always felt different from the other guys, more interested in observing than in participating in conversations about girls. And lately, my thoughts had been wandering into territories that left me confused and excited at the same time. "You're awfully quiet," Tony said, pulling me out of my thoughts. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, just thinking about college, you know. In 6 weeks, I'll be completely on my own." He made a slow turn, driving down the residential street where I lived with my mom. The streetlights created yellow pools of light on the sidewalk, and most of the houses were dark. "You'll be fine. You're smart, responsible, way more mature than most guys your age." There was something in his tone that made me look his way. In the darkness of the car, our eyes met for a second before he looked back at the road. "Connor's gonna miss you," he continued. "You two have been inseparable since you met. I'll miss him too. And your guy's place. I've always felt welcome there. You'll always be welcome." He pulled up in front of my house but didn't turn off the engine. "Is your mom working?" "Night shift at the hospital. She won't be back till morning." We were silent for a moment. Connor continued to snore lightly in the back, completely oblivious to the world. The house was dark, and I knew I had hours alone ahead of me to think about things I probably shouldn't be thinking about. "Adrian," Tony said my name softly, almost as if he was testing how it sounded. "Can I ask you something?" My heart sped up. "Sure." "Have you ever felt lost? Like you don't exactly know who you are?" The question caught me by surprise. Tony had always seemed so sure of himself, so certain of his place in the world. "Every day," I answered honestly. "Especially lately. Like everyone else knows some secret that I haven't figured out yet." He nodded slowly. "That's how I've felt since the divorce. Like I spent so long being a husband and a father that I forgot how to just be me." There was a vulnerability in his voice that I'd never heard before. Tony, the man who always had the answers, who fixed everything that was broken, who was the steady rock of the Martinez family, was showing me a weakness. "You're a great dad," I said. "Connor's lucky to have you. Sometimes I wonder if I am. If I'm raising him right, teaching him the right things. You are. You taught him to be honest, hardworking, loyal, all the things that matter." Tony looked at me again, and this time he didn't look away. There was something different in his eyes, an intensity that made me feel like he could see right through me. "You've always been special, Adrian. Different from Connor's other friends. More observant, more sensitive." My face grew hot at the compliment. "Thanks. You're welcome." He hesitated, as if he wanted to say more, but then looked at the clock on the dash. "You'd better get inside. It's late." I knew I should get out of the truck, but my feet felt like they'd grown roots in the Silverado's floorboard. There was something in the air, an electric tension that I'd never felt before, but which I recognized instinctively. "Tony," I said his name for the first time, and I liked how it sounded on my lips. "Thank you. Not just for tonight, but for everything. For always making me feel like part of the family." He smiled, and even in the dark, I could see how it transformed his entire face. "You are part of the family, kid." I finally got out of the truck, my legs a little shaky. As I walked to the front door, I listened to the Silverado pulling away slowly, the sound of the engine disappearing into the quiet night. That night, lying in my bed, I replayed our conversation a dozen times. There was something different about the way Tony had talked to me, looked at me. Or maybe it was just my imagination, projecting desires that I was only just beginning to understand. The following days passed in a familiar routine. I worked part-time at a sports equipment store downtown, saving money for college. My afternoons, invariably, ended up at the Martinez house. It was a simple 2-story build with a big yard where Tony always had some project going on. Connor and I would spend hours playing video games in the basement, but I always found excuses to go upstairs for water, or to use the bathroom, or to help with something. Any reason to be close to Tony. He worked hard during the day, leaving before dawn with his crew for various construction sites around the area. But in the afternoons, when he got home, there was always something to do. Fix a leaky faucet, paint a fence, organize tools in the garage. And lately I found myself offering to help more and more often. "You don't have to do this," he said on a Thursday, when I showed up to help him load wooden planks. "You should have more interesting things to do in the summer." "Actually, I don't," I replied, grabbing one end of a pine plank. "And I like working with my hands." Tony taught me the basics of carpentry on those hot afternoons. How to properly hold a hammer, the difference between various types of nails, how to measure twice before you cut. His hands often covered mine to show me the correct motion, and I'd focus on not letting my breathing quicken at the contact. He was a patient teacher, explaining each step in detail. There was something almost meditative about the work, the rhythmic sound of the hammer, the smell of fresh wood, the feeling of creating something useful with your own hands. "You're good at this," Tony commented, watching me nail a perfectly aligned board. "Ever thought about doing something construction-related in college?" "I'm studying business admin," I replied. "At least, that's what's on my application form. But honestly, I don't know if that's what I want to do with my life." At 19, nobody knows. I started by working for other contractors, learning on the job. It was only after a few years that I had the courage to open my own company. "And did you regret it?" "Never. It was the best decision I ever made." He paused, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. "Of course, having a family makes everything more complicated. More responsibility, more pressure not to fail. It must have been hard, especially after the divorce." Tony stopped working and looked at me. "Did Connor tell you about that?" "Not much. Just that it happened last year." He sighed, leaning against the workbench. "It was, complicated. Maria and I got married really young, had Connor right after. We grew in different directions, you know. She wanted me to sell the business, get an office job, more stability. But this isn't who I am." There was a sadness in his voice that made me want to comfort him somehow. "You did the right thing. You can't live someone else's life." Sometimes I wonder if I was selfish. Connor was really affected by the separation. "Connor's fine, and he loves you. Anyone can see that." Tony smiled slightly. "You always know what to say, don't you?" Just telling the truth. Our conversations became deeper and more personal as the days went by. Tony told me about his fears as a single dad, his financial worries, the loneliness he sometimes felt when Connor was asleep and the house got too quiet. I shared my own anxieties about college, about not knowing who I really was, about feeling different from the other guys my age. Tony listened with genuine attention, offering advice when appropriate, but mostly just being present. It was during these conversations that I noticed how he looked at me. There were moments when our eyes met, and he didn't look away immediately. Moments when the silence between us stretched a little longer than was comfortable, charged with something neither of us could name. On a particularly hot afternoon, we were organizing tools in the garage when Connor showed up. "Hey, you two are so boring," he said, flopping into an old chair. "Adrian, come play with me. My dad can organize his own tools." "Actually, I like helping," I replied, continuing to sort screws by size. "Of course you do. You're just weird like that." Connor rolled his eyes affectionately. "My dad's managed to corrupt you with his obsession with organization." Tony laughed. "Organization isn't an obsession, it's efficiency. Whatever you say. I'll be in the basement when you guys are done playing Bob the Builder." When Connor left, Tony and I exchanged an amused look. "Bob the Builder?" I asked. "At least it wasn't Peppa Pig." We laughed together, and for a moment everything felt perfectly normal, just two friends sharing an inside joke. But then Tony leaned down to grab a box of nails off the floor at the same time that I bent down to do the same thing. Our hands touched on the box's handle, and we both froze. I was so close I could see the small scars on his fingers, the result of years of manual labor. I could feel the heat radiating from his body, see the gray hairs that were starting to appear at his temples. For a second that felt like an eternity. Neither of us moved. Then Tony pulled away quickly, as if he'd gotten a shock. "Sorry," he mumbled. "Nothing to be sorry for." But the moment had passed, and something had changed between us. There was a tension in the air that hadn't been there before, a mutual awareness that made every subsequent interaction loaded with meaning. I started noticing small things that might have always been there, but which now seemed obvious. How Tony always found an excuse to offer me something to drink when I arrived. How he included me in conversations about adult matters, treating me more like an equal than his teenage son's friend. How his eyes followed me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. And I started making my own small changes. I'd arrive at the Martinez house at times when I knew Tony would be working in the yard. I wore t-shirts that showed off the muscles I'd developed working at the sports equipment store. I prolonged our conversations, created opportunities for us to be alone. It wasn't conscious at first, at least, not completely, but part of me knew exactly what I was doing. I was testing boundaries, exploring this indefinable thing that existed between us. Connor remained completely oblivious to all of this. To him, I was still the same best friend as always, maybe a little more interested in helping his dad, but nothing beyond that. He was too busy with his own life, a summer job, a new girlfriend, plans for state college. Sometimes I felt guilty for keeping secrets from Connor. We'd been best friends for 6 years, we shared everything. But this was different. It was something I could barely admit to myself, let alone verbalize to someone else. The situation came to a head on a Thursday afternoon, 2 weeks after the party where Tony had picked us up. Connor had gone to work, and I showed up at the Martinez house with the lame excuse of having forgotten my wallet there the day before. Tony was in the kitchen, drinking a glass of lemonade and reading the local newspaper. He had just gotten home from work and was still in his dusty clothes, his hair matted with sweat. "Hey," I said, walking in through the back door as I always did. "I forgot my wallet yesterday." "Right." He looked up from the paper. "Connor's not back from work yet." "I know." The words came out before I could think better of it. "I didn't come to see Connor." Tony slowly put the newspaper down on the table. "You didn't?" My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. "I came to see you." The silence that followed was deafening. Tony studied me with an expression I couldn't decipher. Surprise, maybe, mixed with something more complex. "Adrian," he said finally, and there was a note of warning in his voice. "You need to be careful what you say." "Why? Because it might be true?" He got up from the table, and for a moment I thought he was going to ask me to leave. Instead, he came closer until he was standing right in front of me, so close that I had to tilt my head back to look into his eyes. "Because you're young," he said softly. "Because you're my son's best friend. Because this is complicated." "What if I don't care about complicated?" Tony closed his eyes for a moment, as if fighting an internal battle. When he opened them again, I saw something there that made me lose my breath. "Adrian," he said my name like a prayer. "You don't know what you're asking for. Then teach me." It was those 2 words that changed everything. Tony looked at me for a long moment, and I saw the exact moment he made a decision. His hands rose to hold my face, his thumbs stroking my cheeks. "Are you sure?" he asked. In response, I went up on my tiptoes and pressed my lips against his. The kiss was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Tony's lips were firm and warm, with the salty taste of sweat, and something undefinably masculine that made me moan softly into his mouth. He kissed me like he was dying of thirst, and I was the first drop of water in days. His hands moved down from my face to my shoulders, pulling me closer until there was no space between our bodies. I could feel every defined muscle through his sweat-damp t-shirt. The scent of wood and hard work that always accompanied him now intensified by our closeness. "God," he murmured against my lips, pulling back slightly. "Adrian, this is crazy." "Then stop," I challenged, even though I knew I didn't want him to stop. "Ever." Tony chuckled softly, a husky sound that made me shiver. "You know I can't." He guided me from the kitchen to the living room, his hands never letting go completely. The air conditioner had stopped working the day before, and the house was stuffy even with the windows open. The heat of the Oregon summer weighed on us like an invisible blanket. In the living room, Tony stopped and studied me intently. "Have you... with anyone?" "No, not like this." My voice sounded younger than I would have liked, betraying my inexperience. "Then let's take it slow." His hands found the hem of my t-shirt, hesitating. "May I?" I nodded, unable to form words. Tony slowly lifted my t-shirt, his calloused fingers brushing against my bare skin and leaving trails of fire in their wake. When the garment was pulled over my head, he tossed it aside unceremoniously, his eyes scanning my bare torso. "You're beautiful," he murmured, and the sincerity in his voice made me blush. My own hands found the buttons on his work shirt, trembling fingers fumbling with the damp fabric. Tony covered my hands with his, helping to unfasten each button with a patience that contrasted with the urgency in his eyes. When his shirt finally dropped to the floor, I lost my breath. Tony's chest was exactly as I had imagined in my most secret moments, broad and defined, covered in dark hair that formed a trail down to disappear at the waistband of his jeans. Small scars dotted his skin, maps of a life lived with his hands, each mark telling a story of work and dedication. I reached out a trembling hand, tracing a particularly prominent scar just below his left pectoral. "How did that happen?" "Circular saw, about 5 years ago. Connor had just turned 14. His voice was hoarse. "I was in a rush to get home for his birthday." The intimacy of the information, the way he shared not just his body but his memories, left me even dizzier. I pressed my palm against his chest, feeling his accelerated heartbeats under my hand. Tony held my wrist, his eyes closing for a moment. "Adrian, are you absolutely sure? Because if we keep going, there's no turning back. I want this. I want you." He pulled me close again, our bare skins meeting for the first time. The contact was electric, his rough chest against my smooth torso, his heat enveloping me completely. He was a few inches taller than me, and I had to tilt my head back when he leaned in to kiss me again. This kiss was more urgent than the first. Tongues meeting and exploring, hands roaming over discovered skin. Tony guided me to the brown leather couch that dominated the living room, his hands firm on my waist. "Lie down," he instructed softly, and I obeyed without question. The leather was warm against my bare back, sticking slightly to my sweaty skin. Tony knelt beside the couch, his eyes scanning my body with an intensity that made me feel both exposed and desired at the same time. "You're so young," he murmured, more to himself than to me. "So perfect." His hands began a slow exploration, touching every available inch of skin with the precision of a craftsman. Calloused fingers traced my shoulders, moved down my arms, explored my chest and abdomen with touches that alternated between gentle caresses and firmer pressure. I arched beneath him, small sounds escaping my lips every time he found a particularly sensitive spot. I never knew my body could feel so much, that every touch could send waves of pleasure through my nerves. "Tony," I moaned his name, my own hands finding his broad shoulders, holding onto him like an anchor. "Shh, easy. Let me take care of you." He leaned down to press wet kisses along my collarbone, moving slowly down my chest. His mouth was hot and demanding, alternating between soft kisses and light bites that made me arch against him. Time lost all meaning. We could have been like this for minutes or hours. I was lost in the sensation of his hands and mouth exploring my body, learning what made me moan, what made me tremble, what made me whisper his name like a plea. Tony worked with the same meticulous dedication he applied to carpentry, paying attention to every reaction, adjusting his technique based on my responses. When his hands finally found the button on my jeans, I was practically delirious with desire. "May I?" he asked again, always checking, always giving me a chance to stop. "Yes, please." He unzipped my jeans slowly, the sound of the zipper in the quiet house seeming deafening. When he finally freed me from the last barriers of fabric, I was completely exposed before him for the first time. Tony pulled back for a moment, his eyes scanning my naked body with an expression of reverence that made me feel like a work of art. "Perfect," he repeated softly. His own clothes disappeared next, revealing a body that was even more impressive than I had imagined. Years of physical labor had sculpted every muscle, from his broad shoulders to his powerful thighs. He was pure masculinity, controlled strength, and I could barely believe I was there, naked and exposed before him. When Tony joined me on the couch, our bodies lining up perfectly, I thought I was going to pass out from the intensity of the feeling. Skin against skin, heat against heat. Two men lost in something that transcended any previous experience. "Are you okay?" he asked, studying my face. "More than okay. I've never felt so alive." Tony smiled, and it was like the sunrise, transformative and impossible to ignore. He leaned in to kiss me again, deeper this time, and I was completely lost in the feeling of him. What happened next was a symphony of discoveries. Tony guided me through uncharted territories with the patience of a teacher, showing me pleasures I never knew existed. Every touch was calculated, every movement deliberate to maximize my experience. He murmured words of encouragement against my skin, telling me how responsive I was, how good it was to be with me like this. His husky voice guided me through sensations I never imagined possible, my body responding to him in ways I didn't even know it could. When we finally reached the culminating moment, we moved together like two pieces that had found their perfect fit. Tony was firm but gentle, powerful but careful, leading me to heights I never knew existed. The world exploded in sensations, pleasure so intense it bordered on pain, a connection so deep it seemed to rewrite my DNA. I shouted Tony's name, my nails digging into his back as waves of ecstasy washed over me completely. Tony followed moments later, my name a husky roar on his lips as he gave in to the same overwhelming pleasure. We collapsed together, breaths ragged, bodies entwined, sweat mingling as we slowly came back to reality. The silence that followed was heavy, but comfortable. Tony pulled me against his chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my still sensitive skin. I could feel his heartbeats gradually normalizing, the comforting weight of his arm around my shoulders. "How do you feel?" he asked eventually, his voice still rough. "Different. Changed." I paused, searching for the right words. "Like I finally know who I am." Tony kissed the top of my head. "And who are you?" "Someone who wants you. Someone who fell in love with the most incredible man he knows." I felt Tony stiffen slightly underneath me. "Adrian, I know it's complicated. I know all the reasons this is a bad idea, but I don't care." Tony sighed deeply. "I do care. At least I should care. But when I'm with you like this, nothing else seems to matter." We lay together until the shadows in the living room began to lengthen, indicating that Connor would be home from work soon. When we finally separated and began to get dressed, there was a new intimacy between us, a profound awareness of what we had shared. "What does this mean?" I asked as I pulled on my t-shirt. Tony finished buttoning his shirt, his movements slower than usual. "It means we're two men who connected in a deep and unexpected way. It means we have to be very, very careful." "Careful how?" "Connor can't know. Nobody can know, at least for now. This needs to stay between us while we figure out what it is, what it means." I nodded, even though a part of me wanted to shout what had just happened to the entire world. "And then, when we figure it out?" Tony came closer, holding my face in his hands. "Then we'll see. But Adrian, you need to understand. You're 19, you have a whole life ahead of you. I'm 42, I have a son, a recent divorce, a business to run. Our lives are completely different. I don't care. I know you don't care now, but you might care later." Before I could answer, we heard the sound of tires in the driveway. Connor getting home. Tony kissed me quickly, a desperate kiss that lasted only seconds. "Go to the bathroom. Pull yourself together. I'll pretend I was fixing the kitchen faucet." I obeyed, my legs still slightly shaky. In the bathroom mirror, I saw that my lips were swollen, my hair messy, my eyes shining with a light that definitely hadn't been there before. I splashed cold water on my face and tried to compose myself. When I came out of the bathroom, Connor was in the kitchen talking to Tony about his workday. Everything seemed perfectly normal. Father and son discussing everyday things. except for the fact that I now knew the taste of Tony's skin, the feeling of his hands on my body, the sound he made when he climaxed. "What's up, Adrian?" Connor said when he saw me. "Dad said you stopped by to get your wallet." "Yeah, found it." I touched the pocket where I had put the wallet that, of course, had never been forgotten. "Cool. Want to stay for dinner? Dad's making those burgers." I looked at Tony, who was carefully avoiding my gaze while messing with some tools at the sink. "Actually, I need to get home. Mom's making lasagna." "All right. See you tomorrow?" "For sure." When I left the Martinez house that night, I knew my life had been irrevocably changed. I was no longer the inexperienced kid who had walked into the kitchen a few hours before. I was someone who had been touched by Tony Martinez, who had shared something profound and intimate with the man I'd secretly admired for years. And as I walked home under the bright Oregon stars, a single certainty pulsed through me. I wanted more. So much more. 2 weeks passed like a fever dream. Tony and I developed a complex system of secret meetings, coded messages, carefully planned times, elaborate excuses. Every stolen moment was intense and desperate, as if we knew that time was running out. We met at the secluded lake 20 minutes out of town, where Tony sometimes took Connor fishing. It was our safe place, surrounded by tall pine trees that protected us from curious eyes. There, we could just be the two of us. Not my best friend's dad and the 19-year-old kid, but two men hopelessly attracted to each other. Connor remained completely oblivious. To him, I was still the same best friend as always. Maybe slightly more distracted, but he attributed it to pre-college nerves. Sometimes guilt gnawed at me from the inside. 6 years of friendship based on total honesty, and now I was carrying the biggest secret of my life. But when I was in Tony's arms, when he whispered my name against my skin, when he showed me forms of pleasure I never knew existed, all the guilt disappeared. There was only us. There was only that perfect and impossible moment. "You're different," Connor commented on a Tuesday afternoon while we were playing video games in the basement. More mature. My heart leaped, but I kept my voice casual. "It's the proximity of college. It's making me thoughtful." "Yeah, I'm feeling it too. Like we have to savor every moment before everything changes." If only he knew how I was savoring every moment. That night, Tony sent me a message. "Lake, 11 p.m. I need to talk to you." There was something in the message's tone that made me uneasy. Usually, our meetings were planned in advance, and he always used some code. This time, he was straight to the point. I got to the lake before him, too nervous to stand still. The moon was almost full, reflecting on the calm surface of the water, and creating a silver path that seemed to lead to infinity. The air was cooler than usual for August, with a touch of autumn that reminded me that summer was coming to an end. When I heard Tony's footsteps on the trail, my heart calmed down and sped up at the same time. He appeared between the trees wearing a dark blue t-shirt that enhanced his eyes, his hands in the pockets of his jeans. "Hey," he said, but his voice sounded different, distant. "Hey." I tried to get close to kiss him, our usual routine, but he took a step back. "Adrian, we need to talk." The words every boyfriend fears hearing. Except we weren't even officially boyfriends. We were something undefined, something secret, something that existed only in the spaces between official reality. "About what?" Tony sighed deeply, running his hands through his hair. "About this. About us. About what we're doing." "What about what we're doing?" "Adrian." He came closer but kept his hands away from me. "You're 19. In 2 weeks you'll be in college, starting a new life. And I'm a 42-year-old man with a son your age. So what? Did that matter 2 weeks ago when you touched me for the first time? Did it matter yesterday when we made love in your truck? It did matter. It always mattered. I let myself get carried away. I felt like he'd punched me in the stomach." "Let yourself get carried away? Is that what I am to you? A moment of weakness?" "No, God, that's not it." Tony came closer, his hands rising as if he wanted to touch me, but then pulling back. You're the best thing that's happened to me in a long time. Maybe the best thing that's ever happened." "Then why does it sound like you're breaking up with me?" Tony closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, I saw genuine pain there. "Because I love you." The words I had wanted to hear for weeks, but said in the wrong context. "You love me, so you're leaving me? That doesn't make sense." "It does. Because loving you means wanting what's best for you. And I'm not what's best for you, Adrian. You deserve someone your own age, someone who can give you a normal future, kids, a relationship you can be public about. I don't want normal. I want you. You want me now. But what about 5 years from now? 10 years? When you realize everything you missed out on by being with a man 23 years older? You don't know what I'll want in 5 or 10 years. Neither do I. But I know what I want now. Tony finally came closer, his hands holding my face with the same gentleness as always. And that's exactly why I have to make this decision for both of us. Because you're young and in love, and you can't see beyond this moment. Tears began to burn in my eyes. Don't do this, Tony. Please. Adrian. His voice was broken. Do you think this is easy for me? Do you think I want to let you go? Then don't. For a moment I saw his resolve waver. His thumbs caressed my cheeks, wiping away tears I didn't even know were falling. Then he leaned in and kissed me. A desperate kiss, full of everything we couldn't say. When we separated, both of us were crying. I will always love you, he whispered. Always. But I need to let you go on with your life. What if I don't want to go on with my life without you? Then you'll have to learn. Because this has to end here. We stood in silence for a long time, holding each other under the moon, knowing it was our goodbye. Eventually, Tony pulled away. Take care, Adrian. And remember, you're incredible. Anyone you choose to love in the future will be very lucky. He turned and walked back to the trail, disappearing among the trees and leaving me alone beside the lake. I stayed there for hours, looking at the water and trying to process that it was over. Today, 14 years later, I'm sitting in the office of my consulting company in Portland, looking out the window at the typical Oregon rain. I'm 33, in a stable 5-year relationship with Marcus, a wonderful man I met in grad school. We have a house together, 2 dogs, and we're talking about adoption. Marcus knows about Tony, not all the details, but he knows there was someone important in my past who taught me a lot about love and desire. He's never been jealous. On the contrary, he sometimes says he's grateful to whoever helped me become the man I am today. Because Tony was right about one thing. That summer changed me completely. Not just sexually, although he was an incredible teacher in that regard, but emotionally. He taught me that love can exist in unconventional forms, that deep connections can happen in the most unexpected places, that sometimes loving someone means letting them go. I never told Connor about our relationship. When I came home from college for the first Christmas, Connor commented that his dad seemed different, quieter, more thoughtful. I think he misses Mom, Connor said, not knowing that Tony missed me. I kept in touch superficially with the Martinez family over the years. Connor and I naturally drifted apart after college, as happens with many high school friends. He got married at 25, had 2 kids, took over part of his dad's business. From social media, I see that Tony is now a grandpa. His hair completely gray but still strong and handsome at 56. Sometimes I wonder if he thinks about me. If that summer was as transformative for him as it was for me. Or if it was just a passing phase in his life. I guess I'll never know. But what I do know is this. I don't regret a thing. Every stolen kiss, every secret meeting, every moment of pure connection with Tony Martinez taught me something fundamental about who I am and what's possible between 2 people. He gave me my first real experience of love. Not just attraction or passion, but true, complicated, impossible, and transformative love. And maybe more importantly, he taught me that sometimes the greatest act of love is knowing when to let someone go. Marcus often comments that I have an uncommon emotional maturity for someone who grew up without a strong father figure. If only he knew that I learned about love, responsibility, and sacrifice from my best friend's dad during a secret summer when I was 19. But that's a story I carry alone. A precious and private memory that shaped me in ways no one else will ever fully know. My phone rings, pulling me out of my memories. It's Marcus, inviting me to lunch. Sure, I reply, smiling. I'll meet you in 20 minutes. As I hang up the phone and grab my jacket, I look out the window one last time. Outside, Portland continues its normal life. People running from the rain, cars navigating traffic, life moving along its course. And somewhere in this same city, I know that Tony Martinez is also living his life. Maybe thinking occasionally about the young man he met 14 years ago, maybe not, but always carrying a piece of my heart, just as I carry a piece of his. Some loves are made to last a lifetime. Others are made to teach us, to transform us, and then to let us move on. What Tony and I had was the second kind, but no less precious for it. In fact, maybe it was more precious precisely because it was temporary. A perfect and impossible moment that existed outside of life's normal rules. A secret that changed everything. What you're hearing here is just the beginning. The full, unfiltered stories with all the details you can imagine are available now. Check out the link in the description right now. If you're watching this and you've had your own transformative summer, leave a comment. We all have those moments that define us, even if we can't talk about them openly. And subscribe to the channel because every week I share stories about the moments that truly matter in life, the ones that make us who we are today. Until the next video, remember, sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in the most unexpected packages.